Hey everyone, how's it going? It's your boy Skilled Fawn, and today we are going to be doing an Elden Ring challenge run. Let's waste no time and get straight into the rules. Starting off, we can only use the Frost status effect, like I did with the previous status effect only runs. The weapon must have the status effect beforehand, meaning I cannot get the wet blade and put it on standard weapons. This way things will be more interesting, it'll make me try out new weapons. Next, no spirit summons. Though there are some spirit summons that apply frost/frostbite, I want to test just myself. This way things will be more clear. If you want to see spirit summons in my runs, check out the Deathblight and Madness only runs, where I use spirit summons that fit the theme. Subsequently, I must beat the game and DLC. Afterwards, I must defeat all remembrance bosses. I cannot use armor, except for Rykard. More on this later. Lastly, glitches and or exploits are allowed, so expect some cheeky ways to get around areas and take down bosses. I'm excited to share this run with everyone. Make sure to smash that like button, comment, and subscribe to help support me and the channel. Hit the bell icon to be notified when I post similar challenges. Now, let's get into the run. We start by talking to Melina and getting Torrent. Now we will be able to go around the map a lot easier. In Liurnia, specifically Temple Quarter, we find our first weapon, which is the Ice Rind Hatchet. This is a pretty underrated weapon in my opinion. Though its Ash of War got nerfed near the beginning of the game's launch, it is still a viable weapon. Heading into Caelid, we take down an avatar to get some useful mixed flask components. With some preparation completed, let's start taking down the main game bosses. We head into Margit's fight, and similarly to most runs, the damage is pretty good against him. Though this weapon is unupgraded, the damage we are getting now is great. Eventually, we get a Frostbite proc on him and take him down. The first Shardbearer and Remembrance boss that we'll face is Godric the Grafted. He is the weakest of the Shardbearers, but don't expect this to be an easy fight. We get the Frostbite proc on him and keep swinging to get attacks in. The damage is noticeably higher. These are two great things about Frost that I like: the massive chunk of damage Frostbite causes, and also the increased damage that the boss takes. After some time, Godric doesn't stand a chance and gets taken down. Heading back into Liurnia and into Lucaria, we find Relana, Queen of the Full Moon. She is a relatively easy boss, but in phase 2, she can be tricky with her various sorceries. We cause her to be staggered, thus allowing a ton of damage. Shortly afterwards though, she falls to our blade. Next, I want to get another weapon that causes the Frostbite status effect, but also want to showcase one of my favorite glitches in this game. We turn the lands between to nighttime, then head towards the Deathrite bird. I actually posted this cheese a while back in a separate video. It was great to see so much love and support on that video. Eventually, we complete the cheese and acquire our next weapon. Once we acquired Death's Poker, I upgraded it and headed into Radahn and Morgoth's fights. With Radahn's fight, doing the glitch that causes him to charge at the player instead of continually firing his arrows helps a lot. The Ash of War on this weapon is insanely good damage-wise and also building up Frost. In Morgoth's case, it was a lot tougher to use the Ash of War since he is extremely agile moving around the arena. These are both really fun fights, and it is interesting to see how Frost and Frostbite have been doing. Comment your predictions below. Do you think Frost will hold up in the endgame and DLC, or will it start to fall off? I'm curious to hear below. After some time though, we take down both of these fools and claim more great runes alongside defeating a couple remembrance bosses. I mentioned in the rules at the beginning of the video that I'm not allowed armor, besides in Rykard's fight, and here's the reason why. Usually the player has the weapon in Rykard's arena called the Serpent Hunter, but since it doesn't inflict frost, that is a weapon we cannot use. Another option is using ranged sorceries, since we have been partially upgrading the intelligence stat. But then I would probably need more than 10 blue flasks and it would be a grueling battle. Instead, we are going to use Death's Poker with armor to rush close to him, getting easy damage. One reason why I allow armor for this fight is because if I didn't, the fire would stagger me out of animations every second, which would be a pain. Another is because this will allow me to not take as much damage and can stay in the fight for a lot longer. Though using the Serpent Hunter is a lot easier, going for melee attacks is super satisfying. Eventually, we take down Rykard. Since we are doing a Frost only run, this aligns with Ronnie's questline for her Cold Dark Moon ending. We rush through Estelle's fight, quickly taking him down, then talk to Ronnie and become her consort. This is such a fun questline. With this quest completed, we receive the Moonlight Greatsword, one of the coolest weapons in FromSoft games.
You were at my side all along. My guiding moonlight.
Afterwards, we take on Regal Ancestor Spirit, Fire Giant, and Malekith the Black Blade. Regal is always an interesting fight. This boss is almost scaled like an early game boss, but then is placed mid-game, I'd say because the player is meant to take down Radahn beforehand. Regardless, this boss is super easy, and each hit the boss takes a ton of damage. Fire Giant as well. Fire Giant. I really do despise this boss fight, but recently I've been doing it without Torrent, which usually speeds up the fight. Lastly, Malekith is really fun, easily one of my top 5 favorite bosses in Elden Ring, though it can be annoying how quick the fight is with his low health pool. It is nice to kill the boss rather sooner than later. Using the newest weapon in our arsenal, we shred, dealing a ton of rapid slashes. Sooner or later, these bosses get destroyed. With the capital turned to ash, we fight Godfrey and the 2 final bosses, which is Radagon and Elden Beast. Frost was putting in work on these fools and allowed me to get a ton of damage in. Thankfully, Radagon's one status effect that he's weak to is Frost. We make sure to continually proc it. Elden Beast cannot be Frost procced, so unfortunately we lose out on some damage. Using the Zammer Curved Sword is actually really fun, and I highly recommend trying it for those who haven't picked it up yet. With these bosses down, we initiate the final cutscene and pledge allegiance to Ronnie as she plunges the land between into the moon's cold embrace. We start by taking down Plassey, and this boss was made pretty simple by spamming the Zammer Curved Sword's Ash of War. That thing really shreds. Next, we head into Mogwin Palace and take on Mohg, Lord of Blood. I wanted for this fight to use Death's Poker since I destroyed him in a previous challenge run before he could even get to phase 2. Unfortunately, we didn't have that amount of success, but we were able to eventually take him down. Next, we head into Mikla's Erdtree. I want to take a minute to talk about Frost and Frostbite. Similar to Madness and Deathblight, I was going through the challenge and I was thinking, how good is this compared to this status effect? Or would another status effect thrive more in this scenario, etc. Basically, I was analyzing the effectiveness of these status effects and its applications. The Frost proc dealing massive damage on top of then that enemy receiving more damage from various sources is really worthwhile. So far, Frost is really performing well, but I did expect as much. Will this continue to be the case, or will it start to fall off in the DLC? But in the end, I think the question we need to be asking is this better than the best status effect, Bleed? Arriving at the bottom of the Erdtree, we find Malenia waiting for her brother's arrival. One thing the player has going for them in this fight is Malenia's low poise. Nearly every attack that hits her will stagger her out of the animation. Her first phase goes by quickly. Her second is tough because of the plethora of deadly attack. From waterfowl to the clone attacks, Malenia has a lot of tools up her belt. Fortunately, we do as well. Making sure to dodge, attack at opportune times, and be patient, we take down one of the hardest remembrance bosses of the main game. With Malenia defeated, we head below the capital to fight the last remembrance boss of the main game. Lich Dragon Fortisax is a really fun fight, and that music goes so hard. Similar to Regal Ancestor Spirit, this boss is really strange. It is an endgame boss with the health of an early to mid-game boss, but taking him down usually isn't a challenge, though it is annoying because of how cool his fight is. Regardless, we take down the last remembrance boss of the main game, so now let's transition to the DLC. Heading into the DLC, we fight Divine Beast Dancing Lion and Relana Twin Moon Knight. At first, I was struggling with these bosses and just kept dying over and over. This was because of my overconfidence and also how aggressive these bosses are. Eventually, I knew I needed to get good and conquer these two fools. Making sure to play the beast patiently and attacking at opportune times, alongside pairing Relana into Oblivion, we take them down. In Mindra's Mancy, we find the Lord of Frenzied Flame. This is easily one of, if not my favorite fights in Elden Ring and in the Souls series. This fight goes so hard. As we are fighting him, let's quickly talk about Frost and its effectiveness so far in the DLC. I think this is the point where Frost is going to slowly start to fall off compared to Bleed. The DLC bosses have ridiculous health pools, so being able to continually bleed them helps. With Frost, I cannot do that. I must proc it, then wait for the meter to go down, then build it up again. Now, if it wasn't Frost only, a solution could be to use a fire weapon to rid the boss of Frost, but at that point, it feels like it's a lot of extra work. Though this is early on in the DLC, seems Bleed is the victor, but let's see how it fares. We take down Midra, claiming another remembrance boss. Heading into the Shadow Keep, we find 3 bosses: Mesmer the Impaler, Commander Gaius, and Erdtree Avatar. Mesmer is always a fun fight, and I really enjoy getting to the keep just knowing he's next. The other 2 bosses are pretty meh in my opinion, though the better of the 2 is the Avatar, because yeah, screw you Commander Gaius and your BS charge hitbox. Frost was helpful in these fights, way more so than Madness or Deathblade ever could be, but still was lacking compared to Bleed. We need to keep progressing in order to get more answers. Next, we progress further through the DLC and make our way to the final round of boss fights. We take on Ramna, Saint of the Bud, Veil the Dread, Putrescent Knight, and Mother of Fingers. Ramna was a rather quick fight, and it was very apparent how well Frost did in that fight. With Mother of Fingers, this was also super useful, especially since we are using the Zammer Curve Sword. For the other 2 boss fights, there isn't much to say. Frost was kind of a letdown on those fights. Though it wasn't the most useful in those, it was miles better than Deathblight. Heading into Near Elim, we find Needle Knight, Leda, and allies. This group can be quite tough because they hit like trucks and attack together, though it is nice having that banger soundtrack in the background. We get to the final boss of the DLC, and Remembrance boss for our challenge run. Similar to Divine Beast and Rolana, I struggled to find my footing to take him on. It was after a bunch of tries that I was able to get this run. Going for a parry strategy, we parry Radahn unending. It is frustrating that it does take 3 consecutive parries, but man, when you get them, you feel like a badass. I should also mention that this was recorded before the Radahn nerf, so take that as you will. In his second phase, Miquella will join the fight, doing a bunch of area of effect attacks after Radahn's. This phase and fight has to be one of, if not the hardest fights FromSoft have given us. I'm happy it wasn't a cakewalk boss like King Allant, but man, I was not expecting this. Regardless, I do really enjoy this fight. Even though I do bitch and moan about this fight, I always get really excited to fight him near the end of my challenges. We get some really useful Frost procs and make sure to dodge his meteor attack. Eventually, we take him down. This has been Elden Ring with Frost only. We beat the main game and DLC alongside defeating all Remembrance bosses. Now, before I end the video, I want to quickly give my thoughts on Frost. Is Frost worth it in Elden Ring? Totally. It is a really good and fun status effect to use. Now, is it the best? No. Bleed is still the victor, in my opinion. The one advantage that Frost has over Bleed was that more bosses could be frosted than bled, which is something to consider. Still though, the best status effects in my eyes, which are Bleed, Rot, and Frost, are good by themselves. We will eventually get to the other status effects, so let me know down below which one you would like to see me cover next. Make sure to smash the like button, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. Try to do something kind for someone today, whether it's a small or large gesture. This is your boy Skilled Fawn, and I'm out.